that needs help at the moment. We're going to carry on into that conversation. But as we do, certain things that we need to remember, Mark, one of them being that, folks enter into the job market in Kenya every year.
Yes.
With a problem.
By the millions.
Okay.
And the most interesting thing is they have, some don't have the qualifications. Some want to start a business, do not know how to start a business, but KCB to Giajiri, which I'm insisting every time you get one of these opportunities, there's two of your friends that can get a job. But essentially, they make sure you are trained in your profession until you are certified by NITA, which is the Industrial Training Institute, where you're able to say that you are really a plumber. Then they make sure they train you on how to do your business, how to keep your records, how to keep your accounts, how to know you're making a profit and loss. And then they don't stop there. They give you a business toolkit where you're able to have the tools that you need to run your business efficiently. And after they incubate you, which means it's a period of time, they try to make sure you are able to get into profitability. They're also willing to give you credit so that you have the capital to do your business. If there is a reason I miss my 18th birthday, it is because I missed out on KCB to Giajiri program. For more information, please go to their website.
There you go. And so there's stuff to do. So when you finish and you get your skills and then you're able to enter into the job market, there will come a time where we hope then you'll be able to start to get into investing and saving and planning. And then you can decide to buy your own house, but then you're not quite sure how to do that. But then CT has the magic wand.
Well, I do. And I do because of the confidence and the reality and the truth speaking that Diamond Trust Bank have. They're saying, look, this conversation is about mortgages. Most people, mortgages are a thing of the future. And even then, at best, it's iffy, you're not sure. Say, look, let's give you a proposition, consider it, and tell us what you think about it and what you can do with it. One, we offer mortgages, and we offer up to 105%. Not 105. Whether you are employed, whether you're in business, whether you're in the diaspora. If you're in the diaspora, up to 80%. We don't have any hidden charges. We don't penalize you for paying early. But let's just throw in a guarantee that makes you understand why it is that this thing is a certainty. Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. If you haven't heard of it, let us tell you about it. We partner with them to guarantee that if you take a mortgage for 10 years, you will pay 9%. 9. It won't be 9.5. 9. If you want to take it for 25 years, it's 9.75%. It is good. Those are good rates. But you may also think that, well, that sounds a little too good to be true. Well, the truth is this, the proof of the pudding, they say, is in the eating. Yeah, why don't you just take a small step and visit any branch of Diamond Trust Bank, and you will be in a position to actually get to be told in detail. And if you do not want to visit a branch or you're not near any branch that can offer you the services, then actually all you need to do is send an email. Now, don't tell me you cannot send an email, because emails, anybody can send an email. That is, if they wish to. Diamond Trust Bank is offering you the very same thing that most people feel they cannot do. Mortgages at dtbafrica.com. That's all you need to do.
Mortgages at dtbafrica.com.
That's it.
All right. We get into an hour where we have a conversation and we're looking outward and we're looking into the region, and specifically today we're looking into DR Congo. We've been looking at the headlines, we've been reading what's been going on, we've been experiencing what it means to live in a region whereby parts or members of that region are in conflict, and then what to be able to do about it as concerned citizens as well as concerned governments. And to help us out with that conversation this morning is Dr. Kenneth Ombongi. He's a guest in the studio and he's already seated, lecturer at the University of Nairobi in the Department of History and Archaeology. Tariq, good morning.
Good morning, madam.
How are you doing?
I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm good, and looking forward to a good day.
Fantastic. Looking forward to the conversation this morning. A lot is happening in DR Congo. We're looking at the eastern part of the country. We're looking at decades, historically, of things having gone south, literally, and what this portends now into the future. But even before we get into that conversation, you may not know it, but CT here travels to a different African country every week. As he does that, he comes back on Monday morning with a basket full of proverbs for the whole week from a particular country. He'll tell you where he's gone to this week. He'll also tell you what the proverb is. Then we'd like you to tell us how you would translate that proverb, or and you would tell us how you would interpret it, rather. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Proverbs are part of us as Africans. Yes.
Very good. This week we are in the Republic of Djibouti. We are in the Horn of Africa, literally the horn. If you know the shape of Africa, there's a portion there that sticks out like a horn. And we are literally there at the Horn of Africa. The WASP says, many trips to a mud pit enables it to build a house. That's what the WASP says. Mud pit, but that is what helps it to build a house.
Well, very, very interesting. As I said, Proverbs are part and parcel of life in Africa, in Kenya, particularly in our countryside. In urban centers, we learn them for purposes of education and passing exams, unfortunately. But the WASP goes to the mud, and that's how it builds the house. What I hear from here is a small insect that works hard and goes into this not very interesting place. But from this not very interesting, very nice place, that's where it builds its house from. What I hear from here, from the proverb, is that there are things we do that may not be very interesting, may not be very good, but there are good things that can come out of them. And they can come out of them out of hard work. That's what I hear the proverb say.
There are those who say, those who are inclined towards focusing on infinity, as in their faith,
yes.
They say that when you're having a good time and God speaks to you, it's a whisper.
Yes.
When problems arise,
yes.
God is speaking to you with a megaphone.
Yes.
He wants to get your attention, so you are going to get it whether you like it or not.
It is similar to a proverb in my village. I'm trying, I think in my vernacular and then translate it to English.
Okay.
Which
is all right.
Kind of
No,
gymnastics.
that is not true. The sentences you've constructed, had you been thinking in your language, what we would have heard would have been completely different. But since you're a guest, let's say we believe you.
Believe me not, but that's what I do.
Yes.
There's one in my village which says, maybe let me say it in that language, and then
very good.
It says, "Musacho wakonyaira batagu kwa hivyo kama katachi kwa hivyo."
It's true. Yes.
That is absolutely correct.
Yes.
Now, transliterate it word for word.
So it's simply translated literally.
Yes.
It means that a man who works the soil, cannot die without something for as long as he doesn't go to steal. You get that? That is the literal translation. And linking it to the wasi.
Yes.
Working on the soil is not particularly a very clean thing to do.
But
it makes you a man.
There you go.
Yes.
By virtue that you have a house at the end of it, isn't it?
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
Well, I mean, even as we go, towards the center of the continent, we're looking at a region, we're looking at a country that has been in conflict and significant turmoil for easily 60 years. And this is post-colonialism. And we're going to say post-colonialism because when we look at a definite exit and we look at, a definite declaration of independence from what were colonial powers, we're going to use that time frame as when now a country has been independent. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo, large landmass. At the same time, very, very little in terms of infrastructure development, very, very little to show in terms of how mineral and natural resources have been used to enrich itself. There have been many things said about very many countries and individuals and communities who've been involved in extracting the resources from this country, and as a result, hindering the development of DR Congo, as well as many things that have been said about external parties coming in and wanting to be involved and holding government in capture. All of these, they're nuanced and some of them are reality, but the truth of the matter is that we continue to have a country in turmoil and a country in conflict. Most recently, what we've seen is the uprisings that have come out of Eastern Congo and the M23 movement. Again, that has been said over and over that is fueled and participated upon by Rwanda. And out of this, we started to see diplomatic hiccups between certain countries after certain statements were made. I mean, we could go on and on and on in terms of the different things that have been done and said over the recent past. We have seen then in the recent days that there has been what has been called a ceasefire called upon by M23, but we're still looking at a situation that is volatile and that is tender at the moment. So, Prof, from your experience and from, your involvement in these conversations, give us what would be your overview of the situation, historical causes, and where we are today.
Thank you very much, Madam, for that very interesting overview that you have actually given. You sounded like my good history student. The situation in Congo, the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, actually, though you say that it begins from the beginning of the post-colonial era, predates that that period. Congo has been in conflict, has been in a crisis for as long as the country opened up its doors to foreigners, beginning from the 1885 onwards. Congo has been in a crisis, and it's basically a basket case of governance and instability, if you asked me. The situation, and unlike many people will want to appreciate, has its deep roots in the country's checkered history, which begins with the take-up of the country as a private property of King Leopold II of Belgium in 1885. And believe you me, at some point, all the great minerals, the great forests, including the rich Congo basin, were actually a property of one man. This is not unique to Congo in Africa. Even here at home, at some point, what could become Kenya was a property of a company, or our mountains, our forebears, and our fish in the seas and the lakes were actually a property of the Imperial British East African Company, given a charter in 1888. And it's only when it went under in 1895 that it handed over this property to the British government. So that's common in the colonial enterprise, especially where our good friends from the global north were involved. So Congo in 1885 becomes a property of King Leopold II. And literally he completely mismanaged the situation. I shudder to think of a situation where we have had the Holocaust out of the Second World War. We have had the genocide out of what happened in Rwanda in 1994. But we hardly talk about the genocide and the Holocaust, the African Holocaust that happened in Congo when King Leopold took over. And the kind of mistreatment, discrimination, divide and rule, and making people break their backs to work so that he can make profit out of this outpost in Africa. The situation was completely untenable until about 1908, when he had no choice but to hand over the property to the Belgian government, now to govern it. The Belgians, more or less, what changed is simply the statutes in the books on who owned the Congo. But the old structures continued in place, the discrimination, the mistreatment, the political marginalization of the people of Congo. And I've said elsewhere that colonialism, wherever you find it simply means one and the same thing. It means alienating the local people from their cultures, alienating them from their land, so that they can be dominated. And dominated people are easy to control.
Right.
And that's the essence of colonialism: alienation, domination, and control. And the Belgians did that very well. To control people, you have to divide them on a ethnic basis.
Yes.
Literally divide and
rule.
And rule. Create identities that were not existing, artificial, just to make you manage the situation. Because unity always can create chaos if you're a good manager. Keep them apart, keep them quarreling.
Yes.
So that you dominate them. So fast forward, when the change of African nationalism comes in and sweeps across Africa, Congo goes through a transition in 1960 to what we normally wrongly call independence. I've heard people talking about independence, but that was simply a transition of power from one group of elites to another one. The only difference is they were of different skin color. One group was white, the other one was black. But because of the way Congo was managed as a colony, Congo's post-colonial starts in a crisis. They hand over power to President Kasavubu and Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba. I think that's the man after PLO is named. I'm sure PLO has been here before.
Yes.
But they face a crisis within the first year of their administration. Secession begins where the copper-rich province of Katanga declares itself independence.
Yes.
With the very strong support of the outgoing so-called colonial master Belgium. They support a politician called Moise Zombe, who wanted to secede from Congo. Now, the Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, appeals to the UN for support, but he was terribly let down. He didn't stop there, but he decided then that is the height of the Cold War. He appealed to the Soviet Union for help. And that did not go down well with our big brother, the Americans, and of course the Belgians on the other side. Basically the Western Bloc in their ideological world of East-West conflict. And because of that, Lumumba had to die. And he was brutally murdered in 1961. And he dies and leaves a fragile country on the hands of a very weak president, Joseph Kasavubu.
Who, from what you're saying at this point, from American history says it, who, from what you're saying, had already, played very well into the hands of the colonials.
He was one of those blue-eyed boys
He had been marked as the one that they would be able to control from far away.
Because you see, the reason why I talked about transition of power as opposed to what you popularly call independence is that the colonialists never quite wanted to leave, but they were forced out. But they were clever enough to say, well, we may leave physically, but we will still control the way you think, the way you rule yourself, and the way you do things. And then historically, we call it Neo-colonialism.
Were they actually forced out?
Yes, I can strongly say that nobody, my brother, nobody will want to leave the rich country of Congo with all the minerals that you can talk about, from cobalt, tin, gold, diamond. Actually, Congo, I've said before to my students, if ever there was the Garden of Eden, and I believe it was, it must have been either in Congo or somewhere near, because that is where everything is. It's a blessed country. I'm sure if you go, I've been to Kinshasa, I've been to Lubumbashi, the place is so rich, so productive. You know, nobody in his right mind can walk out of such a riches. But the thing is, it got to a point, you know, in the post World War II era, where there was a lot of pressure, particularly from the Americans, for Europeans actually to give up their colonies in Africa. And America put pressure in many of this. The British had been weakened, for example, following the investment they did in the Second World War, and it was no longer attainable to continue controlling some of these some of these colonies financially. So they were forced out. Whether you are talking about Congo, you're talking about Kenya, you're talking about Nigeria, it's in Kenya where it was much more open. An open uprising against the British, which was extremely violent, what we call Mau Mau. But in many other places, the African nationalism was so strong that, and the international pressure was so strong that it became unattainable to continue ruling.
You know, I asked the question, Dr. is because imperialism, if we looked at as a business,
yes,
it was just a changing of the business model.
Yes, you can say that,
because with
or living without living.
Yes, because with the advent of the wars that we refer to as First and Second World War,
yes,
the entire structure of the world as we knew it was altered significantly.
Excellent.
And even the power structure within the world was altered significantly. So what had worked previously was not able to work. Yes. You mentioned the Americans. The Americans went into Vietnam after the French. A gentleman called de Gaulle, yes, who actually warned them and said, these Vietnamese will never stop fighting.
Exactly.
It is not in your interest to go there. Yeah. They did. Yeah. But coming from having worked successfully in Korea, they thought they could replicate the thing in Vietnam.
It didn't work.
It didn't work at all. And it later brought them problems at home.
That's what we are saying is the interface between imperialism and nationalism.
Yes.
In the late 50s and early 60s,
yes,
nationalism won to some extent.
Nationalism.
But as you say, the colonialists never quite lived.
No,
they continued to exploit this,
yes,
because that was their intention. That one phase of imperialism changed and gave to another phase. That's why we call it neo-colonialism,
yes,
or a new colonialism.
Yes. Because if you look at why it is that colonialism was a fad and a fashion of the time, it was. The purpose was to exploit resources.
That's it.
There was no pretense about bringing civilization. All this was just sugarcoating. Yes, exactly. And the colonial masters built their empires and their countries from that exploitation.
I wonder whether they were really masters. They were more exploiters than masters. That's why I said earlier that colonialism never make any mistake. Wherever you find it, it just means one and the same thing. You alienate the local people, you dominate them, you control. And why do you do that? Economics.
And the methods differ. The British seem to have had a better handle of it because they let your own people do the subjugating.
Of course,
yes.
They create a class.
Yes, they do.
And famous British Maclay said this: you create a class of locals who are only locals in skin color, but by all other things, they are your agents. Friends, I mean, we are here this morning speaking our colonizers' language.
Yes, we are.
And
Comfortably.
proud that we can speak English. That's a clear sign of having
what
and
they
the
did
colonialism
works.
has lived on in you and me and everybody else.
Yes, that is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, and this is, I would argue, is where the colonials made the mistake. Because you gave us a weapon, whereas you didn't acquire the same. When we know how you think and we speak your language, you have the disadvantage of not knowing how we think. And
That's
how
it.
we
That- that's it.
Speak our
But it's an
language.
advantage we've never taken care of.
And no, that advantage was taken care of to some extent during the struggle for freedom in different countries.
Yes.
The same weapon that they gave us, the same skill that they took our people to fight along with their soldiers in the Second World War. When they come back, say, "Oh, guys, we can also use this gun against you the way we used it against your enemies."
Okay, I'm sorry. Mark, I know that-
Let's go back to Congo.
Yes, we want to go back to Congo. I want us to take a break and come back because then we now have to get to the place where, I mean, looking and you can't tell a present story without looking at the history.
Yes.
You can't look and say what will the solutions be without asking questions of where did we come from.
Yes.
Dr. Kenneth Ombongi is our guest this hour. We're looking into a conflicted DR Congo, and then when we come back from this break, let's look at if we can make a slight jump to where we are today
That's where we will
with the
come.
rebel
Yes.
movement.
We'll get there.
All right, we'll get there in a short while. We'll take a quick look at the weather and traffic and we're back. And we're looking at some of those intrigues.
Well, Dr. the history of the Congo is replete with betrayal and misuse of leaders, assassinations, coups, what have you. The question I'd really like to ask, and I might be jumping forward, but why is it that Kenya receives military aid? Okay? Tanzania receives military aid. But in the history of the Congo, and part of the reason they're in the crisis where they are, is this consistent humdrum of saying that the Congo military has never been fully empowered. Is that an internal problem or is it an external problem?
You talk about betrayal. There's a book by Professor Katete Orwa, the late, called The Congo Betrayal, The Congo Crisis. It's a very interesting book to read, and Congo is replete with that. Maybe if we go on from where we left,
Yes.
we left at talking about a weak president trying to manage a big country with great influence from the international community, Joseph Kasavubu.
Yes.
Actually, that is where the story begins. He tries that from 61 when Patrice Lumumba is assassinated up to 65. And the CIA realizes that this individual is so weak that he will not be of use to us. So they support one of the senior military officers, Joseph Desiré Mobutu.
Was he senior?
That's subject to debate.
Yes.
But he very quickly acquired the
seniority.
The seniority, and he was called general.
Yes.
This is Africa now. So Mobutu takes over. Because Mobutu was a very brilliant soldier.
Yes.
And the Westerners identified him earlier, and they equipped him in such a way that he was able to control the situation. Mobutu controls the situation by using basically the colonial script. Alienate, dominate, and control. Greater part of Mobutu's support came from the communities in the western parts of Congo, the Bakongo, the Lingo, and the rest. And he made sure that he weakened the eastern part of Congo, where we have a problem now, through political marginalization, deliberate and open discrimination, through profiling. Particularly the region which is in a crisis now is inhabited by people who are actually partly in Rwanda and partly in Congo. And colonialism had one interesting thing.
Yeah.
It never recognized communities and their identity.
Right.
They cut them in between. One group of the Tutsis are in Congo, and another group actually are in modern-day Rwanda. That's a common feature around Africa.
Yes.
You come to Kenya, look at Maasai, the Kuria, and many others.
The Fulani in Western Nigeria.
Western Nigeria. You go to South Africa. The Swana are in Botswana and South Africa. That is in the nature of colonialism. Put a map and say, you are Tanzanians, you are Kenyans, you are Congolese, you are Rwanda. But they are the same people. So Mobutu, because of the fear that he had of the Easterners, he marginalizes them. Actually, the area was never given its right share of what we loosely call in Kenya here the national cake. No development of infrastructure. No, that the others were developed, but they were much better than the eastern part of Congo because these were the Tutsis. Now, because of the Cold War, Mobutu transformed himself to one of the African strongmen, using the same tools that every other African strongman used, from Mzee Kenyatta here in Kenya to Mwalimu Julius Kabarega Nyerere in Tanzania, my namesake, Kenneth Kaunda in Zambia, and all others. Create your ethnic base from a group of ethnic groups, make yourself invincible, and give yourself the great titles that African strongmen were known for. Mobutu called himself, he dropped Joseph, he dropped Desiree, and then he calls him Mobutu, Seko, Kuku, Mbegendu, Wasabanga, the cockerel that dominates all
other cockerels.
Jumbo. We saw that even in our own country, where Johnston Kamau Wangengi becomes Jomo Kenyatta, and we give him the title Mzee, invincible, and we could not even imagine that one day death will come knocking. You go to Tanzania, Nyerere transformed the label Mwalimu. At least when I'm a Mwalimu, you feel, so he became Mwalimu. In Zambia, everything became KK, if you remember. The KK-11, some Zambian football, everything, KK. Down in Malawi, Dr. Hastings Kamuzubanda, the elder of the Church of Scotland, became Mungwasi, lion. West Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, he became Mosievego, which means lion also. Yes. That's common. So, and Mobutu uses that and creates this invincible, posture, and enables him to control and create a semblance of unity. And he became father of the nation and life president. That's very familiar to us.
It sounds like we've heard it somewhere before.
Yes.
Does it not?
Yes.
But there's something else he did, Daktari.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about marginalization,
Yeah.
the Tutsi community, who were Congolese, was stripped of their citizenship.
Exactly.
Stripped.
Yeah.
And he encouraged ethnic strife.
And then he constantly made them appear like they were foreigners.
Yes.
And these are people who have all their life lived
there.
in Congo.
Right.
Yes.
It's just like to call the couriers of Tanzania Kenyans. Or to call the Kenyan
Couriers of
Maasais Tanzanians.
Yes.
So Mobutu made sure that to weaken the Tutsi, who the colonialists had given a fairly privileged position, they became subjects without a country. And he kept on hammering it to the national psyche of Zaire. He changed the name Congo to Zaire.
Yes.
That these were foreigners. And in the national psyche of Congo, the Tutsis, particularly the Banyamulenge, have remained foreigners.
Yes.
But also, what he also did,
Yeah.
you see, all the resources that you found in Eastern Congo went to build a capital.
That's it.
Whereas these people were ignored. But after the 1994 genocide, a problem arose. He welcomed and supported the Hutu militias who then ran into DRC territory.
Exactly. He first created, there's a militia group, he created the Mai Mai militia, which whose mandate was actually to fight the Banyamulenge.
Yes.
And push them back to
Rwanda.
Yes. The Mai Mai did not work very well. There was an opportunity in 94 after the Hutu who were in Taharamwe, who were running away from Rwanda, found refuge in
Congo,
Eastern Congo, Kivu province.
Yes.
And they played to the hands of Mobutu and they used them. And this is where Rwanda feels that its security is threatened because the Ntaramwe, are still in Kivu. And they call themselves the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda.
Yes.
That is why Paul Kagame will never sleep.
And they have always been supported by the government of DRC in place. The only hiatus was when Kabila I was in power.
Yes. And of course the story of how Kabila I came into play.
Kabila won because he was supported by Rwanda and Uganda.
Yes, that's why I said Kabila won.
Yes. And he was supposed to deliver something because the Tutsis, the Rwandese under Kagame had an objective why they were supporting Kabila.
Yes.
And the Ugandans had an objective where they supported him.
Yes.
But within a very short time, he didn't deliver.
Go back to why you said Paul Kagame will never sleep. The reasons as to why that is. And the possible reasons as to why last week we saw a very overt, I want to say, uncomfortability with discussions about what the history of all of this actually was. Why is that?
Yeah, I'll come to that, but I'm willing to answer his question.
Betrayals, yes.
I'm willing to answer his question, and then I will come to you as Madam. You see, with that, after the fall of Mobutu, with very strong support from Rwanda and Uganda, the situation replayed the way it was literally in the 60s.
Yes.
In the 60s, Kasavubu betrayed Lumumba.
Yes.
And literally handed over the poor guy to his enemies and killed in a very brutal way.
Yes.
Mobutu betrayed Kasavubu, removed him and marginalized everybody.
Yes.
Now, he comes in because of Mobutu remained in place because of his relevance during the Cold War.
Yes.
And within the Great Lakes, the Americans needed a stronger person in DRC, just like they needed a stronger person in Eastern Africa, in Kenya.
Yes.
And there were those pockets. So those are a series of betrayals. Nobody within the international community, and this is part of the geopolitics and the geoeconomics that informs the structure of the Congolese government. Very weak state that cannot deliver much. Many parts of Congo, actually not even just Kivu itself, they are ungoverned species.
Yes.
Because the Kinshasa government is a bit so weak because it shares power with the other non-state actors, militia groups, NGOs.
In fact, when you talk militia groups, talk about armed forces from even outside the continent.
Yes, outside the continent, you had the Romanians who were being ejected out of. Congo has never had quite a functional government. That's why I said in the very beginning that it's a very clear basket case of governance that we have had in the continent. And the reason for that, and now a direct answer, with the richness of that country, you're not going to take care of these regional and international interests for the need for minerals if you had a strong government in Kinshasa. If you had a functional government that clearly governed the country and put the requisite tariffs and all that, nobody will want that. Not even the players within the region that benefits directly. You have had Kenya, we export gold at some point.
Yes. I've had this conversation.
Ask where we mine it. The one in Makalda mines, Ikolomani, is not enough to generate the kind of resources that we talk about from gold in this country. Uganda, the same thing, a direct beneficiary of all this. So the reason for, to answer your question, for the series of betrayals that we have had in Rwanda is actually they are geopolitical and geo-economic. That is the case. Now, coming to why Kagame is justifiably uncomfortable with the situation in DRC is after the genocide, Kagame writes to Rwanda and stabilizes the country by trying to make Rwandese believe that there's no Tutsi, there's no Hutu, which has not succeeded very much. But there's a way in which he has made things work. If you go to many African countries nowadays, Rwanda seems to have things working.
They've got their act together.
They have got their act together. But with this, Kagame is very much aware that the Hutus who left after the genocide actually went to the Eastern Congo and they continue to mobilize against him. The Interahamwe, in the name of the democratic forces for
the liberation of Rwanda.
And he believes that this group is being supported by Kinshasa.
Yes.
And that's a quarrel that he has with the Kinshasa. The quarrel he has with Kenya is Kenya was the leader of the East African force that went to Congo, Goma, recently. They didn't seem to do much to get rid of M23 and also the Hutu militias. And it actually, in my view, made Kagame suspicious of the operations of Kenya. And very quickly, Kinshasa just cancelled that and told them, you go back home. And they went to negotiate with SADC. And this force that is now there, working with the UN from South Africa under the umbrella of SADC, came in. So Kagame sees the security and stability of Rwanda depends on whether he has control of what is happening in Eastern Congo. If he doesn't, Rwanda, the genocide might end up playing itself in Rwanda. That's a fear of President Kagame. And unless that is sorted out, I don't think whether President Kagame will go to sleep. Uganda has an interest there. There is no free lunch in international relations.
Right.
Every country pursues its national interest. It's about the minerals and the wealth that Eastern Congo has that gets out of that region through Uganda to the international market, and Uganda benefits that way. They don't say that loudly, but it's very clear. In this part of the world, we have something at stake there. That's why every senior Kenyan politician, had, they're even farming there.
Yes.
Doing,
by the thousands of acres.
I met somebody who is doing very serious farming of beans in some places in Congo. So these geo-economic interests and geopolitical interests in the region, and which actually touch the international community, is what is making this conflict in the DRC very complex to resolve.
And thank you very much. That is a very incisive and brilliant way of putting it. Speaking of betrayals, I want to bring it a bit further home. There are expectations from the political leaders and the economic interests within East Africa, right? And interestingly, Kivu is very near East Africa, right? Is there a possibility that this is the reason why Tshisekedi feels more comfortable dealing with SADC, because they do not have direct access to the Kivu region?
They don't border.
Yes, they don't border the Kivu region. But Southern Congo also has issues right? So is it a question now of thinking who is the lesser evil between Eastern Africa and SADC? Is that what we are seeing?
Ask yourself the question, why did South Africa build a railway line all the way from South Africa to
But
DRC?
that's a question I'm asking myself. Directly, yes.
You see, Tshisekedi might be, running from the fire.
From the frying pan
into the
fire. Yes.
Because, as I said earlier, and a scholar by the name Hans Morgenthau, in his book Politics Among Nations, talks about the dominant of national interest in the pursuit of international relations. That is exactly what is happening. Every country involved in this crisis is actually going for the piece of the heart of Congo.
Yeah, piece of the pie.
And Tshisekedi is in a catch-22, as it were, because you dance to the tune of Kenya, you realize you are walking yourself into an abyss. Uganda, the same thing. Kagame is so conscious of the security and unity and stability of Rwanda to let go.
Yeah.
So he thought SADC and South Africa, probably thought the spirit of Madiba will come along with the South Africans, but how wrong? He was wrong. And this is how now things are already turning out. So there is no easy solution to the crisis in Congo.
Isn't that
the contradictions are far too many. In fact, I'm not surprised that we call it the Democratic Republic of Congo, that is hardly democratic.
Indeed. Isn't that why then that we're and is it that not in that confusion? Because there is confusion, but then there's also a very clear path for a lot of the people who are involved here because they know exactly what they want and they continue to do it year on year. So this position whereby it is confusing as we would look at it is very okay for a number of the people involved.
Yeah, I mean, there are countries that are reaping big from the crisis. Violence is good. Because if you didn't have violence, you cannot get out those minerals through the militia groups. If you had a functional government that governs all the species in DRC, you're not going to get it easy like many people do with cobalt, tin, gold, and many other minerals that are in Eastern Congo.
Yes.
So there are different facets of this problem. There is one, the security facet of it. How do we take care of the interests of Rwanda and Uganda? Because Uganda had a dual kind of interest. There's economic and there's also security. Because chaos in DRC means the overflow of refugees to Uganda. Uganda cannot manage, So Kagame is so conscious about the security of Rwanda to allow anything to happen in the eastern parts of Congo, in Kivu, whether north or south, that supports the Hutu militias or supports the ADF or any other group. You will never hear of that. Now, the interests of South African, Zambians, and Zimbabweans and Kenyans there is actually economic.
Yes.
How do you take care of that interest? The interest of the rest of Congo is peace and stability. So there are different facets of this problem that needs to be addressed. But there is no one-size-fits-it-all solution that will solve that problem in the DRC. And
yet the history speaks very loudly because you talk about South Africa.
Yes.
They sent peacekeepers.
Yeah.
Got killed.
Yeah.
Tempers.
Through the roof.
Yes. But they were accused of supporting local militias who were fighting against the Tutsis who are Congolese.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're running down. We literally have seconds, Doc. But everybody's talking at the same time. Their peace missions, their words, if the historical issues are not dealt with, are we looking at, and even in the next 10 years, solution to the DRC conflict?
No, I mean, Madam, you don't have to be a prophet. According to my cultural orientation, I'm too young to be a prophet.
Okay.
And was still I'm a historian. Somebody has said that if historians are prophets, they are prophets of the past. But you can see it clearly. That there is no easy solution to the Rwandan crisis. And then it's also clear that you're not going to get rid of these international geopolitical and geoeconomic interests out of that country tomorrow. Rwanda is a classic case of a resource curse.
Yeah.
To reach a country, that is a paradox of a rich country that is poor. Now, because of that, I can tell you that even the next several decades ahead of us, we are going to have these problems. Now, the challenge one will want to give the international community is let's solve the problems that we can solve. The humanitarian crisis, for example, that is in the offing at the moment. The negotiating with Kinshasa and Rwanda and Kigali, making sure that the Tutsis, at least the Banyamulenge, are recognized as Congolese, not Rwandese, and they are given their rightful place as citizens of Congo. And because of the siege mentality that group lives with, all of them are actually military. So there needs to be some kind of disarmament, demobilization, and then reintegration. You remember in 2012, and in 2009, where actually M23 came from, in March 23rd, 2009, they signed an agreement, which was supposed to have a component of them reintegrated to the Congolese army and then given their rightful place and the area developed. At least those low-lying fruits need to be dealt with as we think about these other long-term, long-drawn historical challenges that will take long to solve. But the crisis is still with us.
Dr. Kenneth Ombongi has been our guest this hour. It has been quite enlightening, and we're looking forward to further conversations that we can have with you on matters like this. Asante Sana, it's 2 minutes past 9.